Hey everybody, it's Safi and Marco Dish Out on Movies, the only movie review show on YouTube to review movies in terms of food. It's just Marco here once again, and I have not watched the movie yet. I wanted to make this video before I watch the movie because, I don't know, maybe it'll be later than usual, who knows. Hopefully not. I mean, it's a very short movie actually, which is nice. Because I've been pretty busy all day. But we went to Goodwill to get Girl Scout cookies because, we've been trying to find them. Like, for some reason, it's really hard to find Girl Scout cookies. Like, Samoas, Thin Mints, Tagalongs. I want to share this story with you guys because it's a story that I wanted to share. So I was at Goodwill. I got some wardrobe. I got a dress and I got a shirt and pants for the waitress, supposedly, which I don't know if it'll look good like in terms of being a waitress. I hope it does. Like I think it looks pretty neat. I think it was what I should have gotten, but I don't know. That's the thing. Like, it's pretty expensive to get these like old school waitress uniforms, so I just thought, I'll put something together. I'll put something together. Like, it probably won't be the greatest thing. But when we checked out, like, there was this really fucking hot girl. She was a little like, she was a little on the, she looked like she could eat some Girl Scout cookies. Let's just say that. Like, just a little bit. But she seemed really, really nice. And I was like, ooh, shit, yeah. Her aisle opened up, and I was like, yes! And I was really excited. And then we checked out with her, and we were like, oh, we hope the Girl Scouts get here pretty soon, because we want to buy some cookies. And she was like, yeah, I hope so too. And she was smiling. She looked like she hadn't smiled like that the entire day. Like, she looked like as soon as we mentioned the word cookies, it just made her like have like an orgasm in her head. And so I was like, you know what? Like, you know what would be super fun, Safi? It would be fun, well, more than fun, to get some Girl Scout cookies. Let's just say a box of the best ones, which are the tagalongs, excuse me. And then let's just, you know what I want to do? I want to go in the Goodwill. I want to go up to this blondie, and I want to give her the cookies, and I just want to watch her munch on some cookies. I just want to watch her put those tagalongs and go like yum 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 yum. And I don't care if she eats the whole box or what. Like, I don't care. Like, I got them for her. So what? And so, like, I think I'll do that next week, and it'll be pretty hot. So I'll tell you guys what happens, but I got really excited. So that was my hot Goodwill story. I mean, it was so hot, like, I was like, oh yeah. So anyways, I'm gonna go watch this fucking shitty-ass movie, or who knows if it... I'm just saying shitty-ass because I like to say movies are shitty-ass movies. And so anyways, I will see you after I watch the film. So guys, I have finished the movie, and what I did was I watched Crimewave 1985, and it is another quote-unquote fan request. This movie was directed and written by Sam Raimi, and then also the Coen brothers helped write the movie, and it stars... Well, I will just talk about the actors as I talk about the story. And so, it was not a shitty-ass movie at all. It started out as though it was kind of just going to be okay, but then when it got going, it was really, really good. So that's a little, like, spoiler, I guess you could say, for the review. The story is kind of hard to explain because it was kind of... we'll talk about the story, I mean... the story left a lot to be desired in terms of, writing a complete story but I will try to explain. There's this like little story going on where there's like it's a company. Like I didn't even know it was like a burglar alarm company until like 3/4 of the way through the movie. Like the movie was terrible. It like setting up a story that you cared about and something that seemed like, you know, it was going to go somewhere interesting. Like it was so terrible. Like it just opens up and you see this guy and he is played by this really, he's a really good actor. I mean, this is probably the best thing that I've seen him in out of the two things. I also saw him in The Blacklist season 2. He plays this really cool villain, and he kind of starts out as though he's a quote-unquote hero, and then he becomes this villain. And he was a really great villain, and in this movie, he was a really, really great main character. I think his name is Vic, which I didn't even know his name until like the end of the movie when I looked at IMDb. Like the whole movie I was wondering, like, what do I call this guy? Like I just wanted to call him Simp because that's what he acted like the whole movie. But that wasn't his name. It's like it's Vic the Simp. You know, I don't know if that was intentional, but if it was, that'd be pretty funny. I mean, they should have written that into the movie somewhere. So it starts off and he's about to be executed in the electric chair. And at the same time, there's this group of nuns and they are driving to try to save him. And they've killed a bunch of people already. And, you know, right off the bat, the movie had a very cartoony vibe. Like, I loved the way that this movie felt. It felt like an old school pulp comic book. It felt like, you know, straight out of the comics. Like, you know, just watched Ant-Man 3. Ugh, that is not a comic book movie. This movie was a comic book movie. It looked and felt like a comic book movie come to life. And the whole movie, the one thing that I thought about was, why didn't Sam Raimi, why wasn't he able to make a good Doctor Strange 2? You know why? Because of Marvel, because of MCU, because of the studio, because of all the people above him. Even though he's Sam Raimi, and he's one of the best filmmakers in history, he would not have ever been able to make a Doctor Strange movie that was on the level of Crimewave if he was working under those people at Marvel. And so it was kind of unfortunate because to see this, because it at the same time it was really, really good for the most part, but at the same time it makes you wish that he would have had a better shot with Doctor Strange too. I mean, he basically came in and he saved them from having just a complete failure. I mean, the movie was already going to fail because they didn't make it rated R, and then they made Wanda the villain, which I just found out she was not even supposed to be the villain for the movie. It was supposed to be Nightmare, which is so funny because that's the villain that I thought should have been the villain for a Doctor Strange sequel. And so it was funny that was supposed to be the guy. Yeah, it's just Marvel movies, they really they mess it up, because another thing is, like, the whole time I was watching it, I thought, if I had to pick a director for Doctor Strange 2, what the movie was supposed to be, I would have picked Sam Raimi based off of this movie. I mean, this movie alone, it's just... Okay, well, we haven't even gotten into the story yet. I'm just getting excited because I can talk about a movie that I like, and I can say lots of good things about it, and then all the people who pretend like I don't say anything good about any movie or TV show, they can go fuck off. So the simp, he's about to be executed. He starts to tell these flashbacks, and these flashback stories of why he did not do what he was framed of doing. He didn't do whatever he was framed of doing. That's pretty much all we get. Like, it's just so weak in terms of the story. He's like, I work at this company and I have a boss, or there's two bosses, and one of them sold or wanted to sell the company. Like, I had no idea. I literally had no idea what was going on. I was like, he works at a company. He's like a janitor or a security guard. Is he a security guard? He kind of looked like Barney Fife at the beginning of the movie too. And right off the bat too, this movie felt really... One of the funniest things about the movie was that it felt so old-fashioned. I mean, I've been watching like Leave It to Beaver episodes, and just really, really loving them. And even though a lot of them, they have these old-fashioned elements that are kind of cringeworthy. Like, there's this one episode, spoiler alert, where the parents, they acted like the thought of even not wearing any shoes around the house, and you just walk around your bare feet. Ooh, that's terrible. Nobody should ever do that. Like, that's so horrible. Like, and I was like, are you for real? Like, I used to do that all the time at home. Like, I got a couple of splinters once in a while, but I really like walking around in my bare feet, actually. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so, but that's a side story. But this movie, it felt even somehow, like, I don't know how they do it, these people. These people in 1985, fucking Sam Raimi and the Coen brothers, they made a movie that felt like more old-fashioned than Leave It to Beaver, Andy Griffith's Show, Father Knows Best, Dick Van Dyke. Like, this movie was so old-fashioned. Like, I was like, God, watching this movie is like going to a museum and watching like a museum exhibit of like past filmmaking techniques. I mean, it was just so funny. Like, I was like, how did they make this movie in 1985? Like, like, just thinking about nowadays, they would never ever agree to make this movie. Any of these stupid studios, they'd never agree to make like a 1930s throwback slapstick comedy movie. I mean, it almost felt like a passion project. It almost felt like this was like the first film of one or the other. The Coen brothers or Sam Raimi. But we know that with both of them, Sam Raimi, his first movie was Evil Dead, which I never finished that movie, but I thought like the first half was like really, really good. And then the Coen brothers, their first movie was Blood Simple, which that was very good. It was a little simplistic, but it was very good. It was like a little Hitchcock movie. And this movie feels more of like what I would expect a first movie to feel like. Like, if I was, if I had to make a guess, like, this really does feel like somebody's first movie. It doesn't feel like these guys have made other movies and then all of a sudden they paired up and decided to make Crimewave. And so that was another thing that I thought was funny. But like, those flashback things, they just got me like, they caught me so off guard, because I was like, wait a second, this is 1985 and we're still doing the thing where you make the screen really wobbly and then you do a flashback. That's like an old movie technique, like an old movie technique, and like the whole movie, I was like, God, did like old people possess Sam Raimi and the Coen brothers when they wrote this movie? Like, it's not a bad thing. It's just funny. You know, like there's another part in the movie where the cops, you know, there's the one of the neighbors in this apartment building. He was killed earlier, and he's in the elevator, and this little boy lets him out or something, and then the police go up to him, and they're like, "Hey son, what are you doing with that Negro over there?" And I was like, God, this movie is like so like it's like a time capsule. It was so funny. So I really love that part of the movie as well. The way that it felt so old fashioned, even though it was made in the 80s. You know, I really have to commend them for making a movie like this, because I got to watch it. You know, I know that they never do that nowadays. They never make a movie that was really true to, you know, that style of filmmaking, you know, like the Abbott and Costello days. And let's go back to this bad story. So this whole movie is told through like one giant flashback, which was another like red flag. I was like, what? I was like, the whole movie's a flashback sequence? I guess that's supposed to be funny. So the story is the Vic the Simp, he has this boss, or two bosses, and one of the bosses, he is this guy who looks a lot like that one guy from the Police Academy movies. You know, the one who talked like, you know, that weird guy. He would go like, you know, remember that guy? This boss looked exactly like him, and I thought that has to be that actor. And then I looked him up, and I was like, what the hell? This was like some really famous producer, and he died in January of this year, and he was not the guy from the Police Academy movies. And he talked normally too, though. So he's I guess he hired these exterminators to kill the other guy who was trying to sell the company, and the other guy was played by Bruce Campbell. And Bruce Campbell was not in this movie very much, which I thought was a shame, because I think he deserved a little bit better. Like, not the character. Like, I hated the character. You know, he's a very typical, like, they call him a heel. And, you know, he's just typical, like, sleazebag, douchebag. But that's what I liked about him. I thought that they could have used a little bit more of him in the film. But that's okay. That's fine. I mean, that's like a nitpick for this movie. So the boss wants to take the other one out, and he hires, I mean, even IMDb calls these guys cartoony. And you know that when the official people who made the movie call these guys cartoony, you know that's a bad sign. And like right off the bat, and I know I've said right off the bat, like right about fucking 50 times, I was a little hesitant at first about these exterminators because they were really, really cartoony. I mean, wow. As I said, it was like a comic book come to life. And both of these guys, they were like just complete caricature people. Like the one guy on the right, or I guess the left, whatever, the big one, he looked a lot like that guy from the Ed Wood movies, you know, that big wrestler guy. And he worried me the most at first because he did this voice the whole movie, where he was like, like it was a really strange voice. It was like a voice that you would use to as a really bad disguise if you're trying to disguise your voice. And then the other guy, he was like a Tim Burton character. Like, he looked like he could have worked for the Penguin in Batman Returns, and he was really cartoony. But there was a really funny running joke with them, and I laughed a lot throughout the whole movie. The only part where I really didn't laugh as much was the final fight, because at that point I was like, okay, I want to see the good guys win, and that's it. Like, I wasn't really in the laughing mood anymore. I wanted the business to get done between these characters. There was this really funny running joke where I think it was a pack of cigarettes, and it was inside the glove compartment, and the glove compartment's open. and the skinny guy, he'll reach his hand in the glove compartment, and then the fat guy will just completely close the glove compartment on his hand, and it makes him scream at the top of his lungs for like an entire minute. It was really hilarious. That was probably one of my favorite jokes in the movie. So he hired them, and oh yeah, before that, because this really all takes place over a single night as well, which, once again, that's a common thing that could happen in like people's first movies, to make things a little bit easier, so that everything just happens in a single night. The Vic the Simp, he meets his boss somewhere or something, like, I don't know, I guess that had something to do with like him framing him or something. I had no idea. Because the boss, he walked into this broom closet or something. Like, it was really weird. I had no idea what was going on. But then the love of Vic's life walked into his life, and immediately the movie started making me laugh. That was the moment when, as soon as Nancy walked on scene, that was the moment that I knew that the movie was going to be good. Because then she's walking across the street, and she almost gets hit by a car, and it's the exterminators. And there's also a fantastic returning joke with them, where Vic the Simp runs outside and he calls them a maniacs, and then the fat guy comes all the way back and punches him and tells him never to call him a maniac again. And well, at the end of the movie, or near the end of the movie, he calls them maniacs again, and I thought that was really good. Another really good joke. And so he has fallen in love with this woman who has walked into the building, I guess to purchase something. And but she's interested in Bruce Campbell, the Bruce Campbell boss, and he takes her out to this place. It was like a club, and then Vic the Simp goes there too, because he wants to get with her, you can tell. And she was pretty good looking. I mean, she kind of looked a little bit like Gina Davis. The one thing I will say with her is that, I was really hoping to see more of her too, like in terms of her acting, because she didn't really get that many jokes in the whole movie. Like, it was mostly like jokes on the other 4 or 5 characters. Like, I kind of wanted to see more of her. So that's another thing. But again, it's like a nitpick, because I still really liked her character, and I thought, you know what? She's not as bad as, like, she's not the worst person. Like, she's pretty okay. Like, I was really worried that, based on the description of the movie, I was really worried that she was going to be like a bitch the whole movie. And, even though the simp is a simp, I was really worried that she was going to play that type of unlikable character. And instead, no, she plays like a pretty, like, normal, decent person, I guess. But the story really falls apart because the story is so bad. It's basically just a typical, like, Coen brother type of story where, someone's at the wrong place at the wrong time. You have this crime element. You have bad guys who chase the good guy, and, it definitely felt a lot like a Coen brothers Sam Raimi mix-up movie. It reminds me of in those food videos on YouTube where people will take two foods and then, like, mush them together or something, or put them in a blender, and then you have to try to tell which foods they are or something. That's kind of what it reminded me of a little bit. And I'll say that, like, if you were to just judge the movie on the story is trash. Like, the story was really bad. Like, it was just... I mean, there really wasn't even a story. Like, it was really funny. I was expecting, like, a story to happen. And nothing happened, It just... Most of the movie is just Sam Raimi being Sam Raimi. And it was like he just had fun and went nuts on everything and everyone. But the story was, like, practically non-existent. So, I don't know, like, on one hand, this is a really good movie. Like, I was totally not expecting this to be what it was. Like, I was kind of just expecting, like, a comedy, like, just a screwball slapstick comedy based on, like, the first 10 minutes. But it just turns into a straight up, like, comic book movie. I mean, the exterminators, they have this whole thing where also the main boss, he accidentally goes across the street when to quote unquote check on the other boss, who would then get killed or something by the exterminators. And he walks in there and he gets killed too. And then the exterminators are like, whoopsie, we just killed him too. And I was like, oh, isn't that kind of bad? Like, and that was the part where it kind of drifted away from being a Coen Brothers movie. Because there were a lot of Coen Brothers moments where the opposite of what you would want to happen happens, like that moment in particular, where, they make this big mistake, and, they can't bring him back to life or anything. So, it's pretty bad. And you'd expect for them to have to cover it up and go through all this mess. And then it would just get worse and worse and worse, like a typical Coen Brothers movie. But instead, that's when the Sam Raimi element kicks in. And the boss's wife, she was watching the whole time, and she was using binoculars. Now, the one thing that I will say is that the boss was kind of gloating that he was going to kill the other boss. And he was staring up at his wife before he entered the building. And he was talking and gloating. And I was wondering, wouldn't she be able to, like, tell what he was saying? Like, if she looked down there with zoomed in binoculars. Like, you know what I mean? Like, wouldn't she be able to tell? So I thought that was kind of fishy in terms of, like, logic and reasoning. Other than that, she saw everything the whole time, and then the big fat exterminator, he goes after her. And what I think is the best sequence of the whole film. I mean, it is totally... I mean, it felt like I wish this was something like this was in Doctor Strange too. Because there's this whole thing with them breaking into her apartment and the fight between them. that the way that it was so creative, it was so stylish and fun and funny and dark, and it really felt too like if they remade this and they turned it into like a serious movie, or just took elements, like this would be the sequence, because I kind of felt a little, it did kind of make me feel something, that, you know, I didn't want her to get killed by this guy. Like it was pretty effective at certain points. And there's this part where, you know, he's like dragging the carpet, and it drags everything in the whole room, and like really crazy things happen in the sequence. And then what I think is another hilarious part of the movie is that neighbor who I was talking about earlier. He comes up there to try to save her, and, you know, he's got shaving cream on, which, you know, he was in the middle of shaving, and it's just still on his face. You know, totally cartoony, this movie. And he tries fighting the fat guy in the dark. And that was a moment, of course, that reminded me of Blood Simple. And instead, he runs and jumps out the window on accident. And what was funny, though, was that then he crashes on the ground. And he thinks that he's dead, because he thinks, like, oh no, there's blood on me. And then he feels the shaving cream on his face, and he's like, he's so happy he's still alive. And then he gets up and he gets run over by the other exterminator. I thought that was hilarious. So a lot of it takes place in this apartment building with this woman, and everything just springboards from that, and, you know, all these characters come into play. Vic the Simp, he ends up coming to the rescue of the woman who went out to dinner with Bruce Campbell, Nancy, and he comes to her rescue, and he tries to help her out and hit on her and all that stuff. And on one hand, I can see how people would hate this character. Maybe it's just because I really like this actor in The Blacklist that I didn't hate him as much. I mean, I did kind of hate him. It's just, this is what Sam Raimi movie characters are like. You know, like, this is exactly what they're like. This guy was like Tobey Maguire Spider-Man times 10. So I really can't, like, fully hate him for being like a typical Sam Raimi style character. What I did hate, though, was how he doesn't really make like a character transition throughout the movie. Like, he starts off, and he, you know, I guess he has trouble talking to girls, and he's a simp. And he never really changes throughout the whole movie, even though he comes to her rescue and he comes to her aid, and he ends up defeating all the bad guys at the end of the movie, which, again, he was like a comic book hero come to life. But he never changes, you know, he never, like, becomes a more, like, mature version of himself. And I kind of wish that, like, maybe if it was, like, a more serious version, like, I kind of wish that there was a story there where he transitioned into being, like, less of a simp. Because I was like, you know, at the end of the movie, I was like, you know, okay, maybe this woman will stay with him, and you know, she really likes him, and she'll stay with him because he saved her life. And, you know, that was he really did a lot for her, to be fair. Like, in my opinion, like, she should be married to him forever after what he did for her that one night. Like, I don't care at all. But at the same time, I kind of feel like living with him based off of how he acted in the movie. in the first half. Like, God, he was so like clingy, and just he would go on and on and on about himself and this cheesy crap that he would say. And I thought, in 10 years, she's going to be cheating on him with a real exterminator, and then they're going to have a divorce or something. Like, I just didn't feel like it was as happy of an ending as it seemed. It was happy, I guess, because he was a good person. But that's another thing, too, is that, like, was it really good to, like, glorify, like, simps like this? Like, it's one thing being, like, a quote-unquote nice guy, which, traditionally nice guy characters, they're treated like trash in movies. And, but on the other hand, this guy was like, he was less of a nice guy, and he was more so like a I don't know, like, he was a little extreme, and I know the whole movie was extreme. That was the thing, though. They didn't really make Nancy very extreme. Like, Nancy was the most normal character in the whole movie. She never really had to do anything extreme, basically. She never had to balance on things and do trampoline jumps and things. Like, she never really had to do much of anything in this film, except for reacting to everything else. So, she was the most normal person in the movie, and I thought, she doesn't like him, or does she? Like, her personality was really, like, bare bones basic. Like, I didn't even really know who she was as a character. Like, I thought she's pretty, but that's about it. But again, that's the story. That's character. What I'm focusing on and what made the movie really, really good was Sam Raimi's insanity. And it continues and continues with people fighting, chasing each other around. I mean, it is like a cartoon in so many ways of, like, I just said earlier about that guy falling out of an apartment building and then surviving. I mean, come on. That is obviously Looney Tunes cartoony. But somehow that didn't bother me. Like, usually when I know that a movie is going to be like Looney Tunes, it's kind of like a downgrade for me, and it makes me think the movie's going to be trashy and sleazy and just not worth the time. Like, one movie that people have talked about a lot in terms of that is Baby's Day Out. And I've never seen that movie, but apparently it's like all about this baby who just goes around New York City and just somehow, like, causes all this chaos, and they said it's like a cartoon. And see, like, that movie sounds like it's terrible, and, like, I don't want to watch that at all. And this movie, though, it was really, really good. Despite all the flaws, I would highly recommend the movie. There was another great sequence involving the boss's wife, and she was also like a typical Coen Brothers movie character. Like, I think that on one hand, that's another thing too. Narratively, it was a little confusing who the main character really should have been. Because the wife of the boss, she spends a lot of this movie fending for her life. She is more of like the Coen Brothers main character. And then Sam Raimi, I felt like he really liked Vic the Simp and Nancy. And they were like typical characters for him. So you had these different characters who were very similar to each director's style. And that was a little bad in terms of, I just wish they would have picked one, maybe. Like the whole thing, if I had gotten to see the fight with Nancy instead of the wife and everything, and replace all the stuff with the wife, give that to Nancy, I think the movie would have been even better, honestly, because the wife of the boss, she comes into this movie for like 30 plus minutes and then she disappears. Like, they have this amazing sequence where I was like, wow, this was cool. This was fucking cool. Where she goes into the burglar alarm company that her husband created, and she's going through all these sets of doors where you can test the different alarms, and she's running through all of them, all these colored sets, and then the bad guy's running through all the different doors as she's closing them in on him, and then finally she gets to the end, and she pushes all the door things down like dominoes, and he's running away. And that was really, really good. That felt like the final fight of the movie. And then it's like, no, there's still like 30 minutes left, and it's like, what the hell? And then, okay, we haven't gotten to like the ending problems. Because the ending is probably the worst part of the movie, along with the beginning. The middle stuff is what's good. Oh yeah, and there was a great part too where, and I know I was like, I just pulled a Safi. There was a great part where Vic the Simp brought Nancy home because her dress was it had mud all over it, which, she did have one little good joke where she was like, there's no bright side, no bright side, no bright side. And she's just yelling at him and just like running all around him. And oh yeah, she did do a dance with him that like transitioned into her doing the dishes with him. I guess that was, but see, she didn't really have anything else after that in terms of jokes where she could perform and jokes that involved her. It was mostly the other characters. But he took her home to help her out because, he's a simp and he's just going to do everything for her. He's going to clean her clothes. He's going to, it was like he was dealing with a child almost, like the way that he was acting. Like that's what was really like weird, was how he was like, I'm going to take care of you, relationships. And I'm doing my simp voice now. Nancy, relationships are all about people taking care of each other. And I want to take you home and take care of you. Like that's what this guy was like. And I was like, ugh. Like, ugh. Like, ugh. He's kind of like a more likable version of that guy from I Love You, Beth Cooper, if you've ever seen that movie. That would probably be another movie where it's kind of like about a simp character, and that that movie's a disaster. I mean, that movie's nowhere near as good as this movie. But he reminds me of him a little bit. But there's this great sequence where she has taken her bathy poo, and she's about to, and she's going to hand him her dress. And he's closed his eyes and everything, and the bad guy, the other bad guy, he's standing there, and he's listening to everything that's happening, and he's kind of like trying to help him a little bit. It's pretty hilarious. But then the best part is when the guy leaves to get more salt, or to get more cleaning stuff for her dress. And he leaves the apartment, and then the bad guy starts to talk with her, and it's like a heart-to-heart conversation, and then he surprises her, and he attacks her, and that was another really funny sequence. So it all culminates in, and I'm trying to think, is there anything else that I Okay, there was a Bruce Campbell's last moment in the movie was something that I predicted as soon as I saw this ladder that, or not ladder, a staircase. So the boss's wife, she escapes and she runs down these staircases, and the one at the bottom, it keeps on going up and down because the the big fat bad guy, he is pulling it up and pushing it down. And as soon as I saw that staircase, I was like, oh, I know what's going to happen. Bruce Campbell is going to walk underneath the staircase, and and then the guy's going to push it down and hit Bruce Campbell in the head, and it's going to be game over. And that's exactly what happened. And even though that's what happened, it was still really, really funny. So it all culminates in like this car chase. And the car chase was where it really turned into like more of a comic booky action movie. Like it really reminded me of Spider-Man. I mean, and I thought too, this final action sequence in Crimewave, this random movie that I never even knew existed, it's better than all the action sequences in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3. You know, the third one. Like, even though that movie wasn't as bad as everyone said it was, the action sequences in this movie alone, they destroy Spider-Man 3. Like, the fight with the wife and the guy in the apartment, the fight with the wife and that guy with the doors. I mean, just those, even. Those are better than Spider-Man 3. So, this car chase kept going on, and it was getting pretty good, and I really liked this sequence a lot. I thought that it had some great moments. It looked a little fake at certain points, but that's fine. You know, I wouldn't want them to actually be doing this in real life. You know, I'm glad that they were faking it. You know, they can have one fake-looking sequence, you know. Ant-Man 3, the whole movie looked like this sequence. Like, the whole movie looked fake as hell. They probably didn't even have real cars in Ant-Man 3. Like, that's how fucking terrible it was. And finally, the skinny guy in the exterminator crew, he gets taken out permanently. I thought that it was a little sad with him because at first it seemed like he was gonna change, and he was like, okay, I'll never do anything bad again. And I thought, you know, it would have been actually pretty interesting if he did change briefly or something, you know, like just to add a little bit to his character. But no, he was obviously just tricking him, and but then he gets fucked up and he gets knocked on the highway. They probably ran him over after that, so he's dead. Then the car crashes and the extermination van crashes, and it still is not over. And we have this like final like boss fight between Vic the Simp and the big wrestler looking guy. And what I thought was even funnier was the fact that in another Sam Raimi movie, you have a woman who is balancing on like a bridge or a ledge in a car because Nancy was in this car and she was going to fall off. And I was like, oh, this is exactly like, didn't they do that in Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 3? Like, for some reason, like, Sam Raimi really likes it when, like, cars are, like, balancing off of a ledge, and then somebody has to be saved. And then, of course, Spider-Man 2 with the train. I mean, this sequence was a lot like that at a certain point where the car was about to fall off even after the bad guy has been defeated. You know, all the bolts on this thing, this plate in the ground, they're all going to come out one by one by one. Like, that felt like the train sequence in Spider-Man 2, where it was like really, really close to going off the ledge and killing everyone, and he had to keep on shooting those spider webs to stop the train. So yeah, I mean, they have this fight, and I was really getting kind of nervous for these characters too. Like, I was genuinely nervous and concerned. I cared about these characters, because this wrestler guy, he was not dying. Like, he took so much damage throughout the movie that he really was like a boss in a video game, where he was just almost unbeatable. It felt like it was insurmountable odds, and then thankfully, finally, he gets defeated, and he gets a car tossed on him in the water. And then they had a little fake out where you thought Nancy also got into the water, and then she's with him and she climbs over him. That was another funny part, where she climbs over him and she's like stepping on his eyeball, and she's doing all the stuff to him, climbing up and over him to safety. And then he falls in the water, and she thinks he's dead. And see, this is where the movie gets really, really dumb and bad, because, and it doesn't ruin the movie, thankfully. Like, at first I was kind of sad, because I didn't want to give the movie a bad grade and a bad review based on this last wrench that they threw in the plan, the wrench that they threw in the movie. Like, I didn't want to judge the whole based off of this little thing. And this story, it would have been a major story. Like, the stuff that happened in this movie, the trial, like, could you guys imagine the trial that would happen for all the events that happened in this movie? It would go on for ages and ages and ages and ages. And it would probably be like a bunch of different trials too. You probably have a bunch of different civil trials. You know, they didn't even mention the guy who loaned his car to the simp near the end. There's this good Samaritan guy, and he kind of looked like the Marvel guy, Stan Lee. He kind of looked like Stan Lee a little bit, and he gives the simp his car so that he can go rescue the girl. And there were some really good camera shots in this movie too. Like, I love the way that this was shot. I love the cinematography. There were so many shots that I could pick out, and I could say this is like a comic book come to life. And I know I've said that a couple of times, but it's true. And I don't know why people haven't seen this movie. Well, I kind of know why. I mean, we'll talk about that too. But you think about all of the trials and all of the media frenzy over this case, the story over this case on the news. This would be a big deal. It would not just be this thing where it's like, oh, that one guy obviously did it. You know, at the beginning of the movie, I thought, you know, is this all just based on that one killing, or like just one singular killing? Like, no, it's based on every single thing that happens in the whole movie. And I was like, there's no way that... So I was really disappointed with that, because the Coen brothers, I just don't know how they thought that this was good. I don't know how they looked at the script that they wrote and said, yes, this is very realistic, because they talk about how Nancy is the only person who can give him an alibi. Well, what about Bruce Campbell? Like, even though Bruce Campbell got hit by a ladder, what happened to him? He could give that guy an alibi. And don't tell me that he wouldn't be interviewed, too, by the police. And that's another thing, too. What happened to the wife of the boss? the wife of the boss could have helped out the simp guy. I mean, there are so many people in the movie, so many witnesses. The guy who gave him his car, so many people who could have helped out the simp so that he didn't get close to being executed. And instead, it's like, oh no, they just blamed it all on him magically. You know what that reminded me of? That reminded me of Chucky, Season 1, where they were just going to blame gay Jake at the beginning for all the killings that were going on. Like, that's what that reminded me of. I was like, this does not make sense at all. And along with that, it seems like the police didn't do any investigating. Like, I guess since it's a cartoony world, they didn't really care, so people just get away with things right and left because it's Sam Raimi verse. And then what happens is that the nuns finally come in to save him, and Nancy, she became a nun because she thought he was dead. Which doesn't make any sense, because it's like, where has she been this whole time? Like, I guess you could try to make an excuse as to, she said for 3 days she thought he was dead, and then she went and became a nun. And so then, therefore, she would be closed off from the rest of the world. She wouldn't hear about the news, I guess. I don't buy that. I think that was a total cop-out, an excuse. And so it really didn't make any sense that this whole time this big case was going on or whatever, that she would never hear about him. Stupid. It wouldn't even matter if she heard about it on the news. They would have had to interview her for the case. She was a primary person of interest in the case. Not like a suspect, but like a person that the police would want to talk to. And so that was just stupid. And so she saves him, but that's not enough. The nuns, who have taken their vow of eternal silence, they have to break the silence so that an innocent person doesn't get killed. And I thought, there were some really cool things in the movie like that were kind of dark. Like, there were a lot of, like, little mini dark, depressing elements that I wished got treated more seriously. And kind of got emphasized a little bit more to balance out the cartooniness of the movie. But overall, this was a really good movie, surprisingly. Like, I don't think it's one of the best movies, obviously, but it's a really good movie. I mean, it's a niche movie because a lot of people, they don't like this type of humor. They call it old-fashioned humor, just as I did. And, a lot of people, I don't think they would get this movie. I looked on Letterboxd at all the quote-unquote modern film fans, and all of them give this movie like a 2 out of 5, 1 out of 5. And it's because they don't get this. They're into, crap like Ant-Man 3. They don't get something like this where it's really stylized and really, just a very specific thing, like a tribute to 1930s comedies like this is. And I say that because, like, this movie, like, it really felt like the 20s, the 30s. Like, it didn't even feel like the 80s, which was cool. So, and it's sad, too, that this movie, like, I guess it didn't do very well, and, nobody even talks about it. So it's good that at least that I talked about it, because now I can recommend people to watch it. In terms of food, it's funny because what happened tonight really fit the movie perfectly. So we couldn't decide which pizza to get. So we got Domino's and somebody else got another type of pizza. And at Domino's, I got cheddar cheese, pepperoni, and hot buffalo sauce. I don't know why. I just was in the mood for that. I guess. I just picked randomly. And then the other person got, like, I guess it's like a supreme pizza. And both pizzas were different. Both pizzas were kind of like B-grade pizzas. And when you have both of them, they kind of balance the other out. But it's kind of a strange mishmash. It's like, you never expected to have this one type of pizza and another type of pizza on the same plate, because they're so different, they're so unique, they're both really, really stylized. Like, I would say that Domino's is the Coen brothers, and the other pizza is like Sam Raimi. And so when you combine the two, you get mixed results that you can still enjoy for one evening, and it's a really good dinner. So anyways, that's my review of Crimewave. Yeah, another thing. Who the fuck called it Crimewave? Like, whose idea was it to call the movie Crimewave? Like, because that's another thing. Like, yeah, I guess it's a crime wave. The crime wave would have been investigated. And they wouldn't have just blamed everything on this one guy. Like, this isn't like the JFK assassination where, it's like, oh, okay, that one guy got shot and killed, so let's just blame it on that one guy who didn't do anything. Like, no. This is like all these different people getting targeted, all these people getting killed, all this destruction, chaos, mayhem. I mean, the only thing that this movie didn't have was somebody walking away from like a giant explosion. Like, that's how insane this movie was. So, yeah. Please like this video, comment, tell me what you thought of Crimewave, and then please subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see more honest movie reviews. Goodbye, everybody. See you soon for Muck Season 5 review.